This will be a short conclusion to the review of fractions, decimals, and percents. In part 1, we talked mostly about fractions and decimals. So to finish this topic up, we will discuss percents. To start off with some percent basics, we're probably familiar with the percent symbol used to denote percentages. But one thing that might be helpful to know is percent comes from a Latin phrase per centum, which really can be interpreted as out of 100. So percent means out of 100. Using this, along with our decimal and fraction knowledge we've discussed previously, let's make 3 statements about the shaded portion of the figure I have at left here. It turns out that there are 100 small squares in this figure, you're welcome to count, and 82 of them are shaded in purple. So I could say that the purple shaded portion is 82% of the total figure. I think you'd all agree with that much. I could also say the shaded portion is 82 out of 100 pieces of the total figure. And I could also say the shaded portion is 0.82 of the total figure. So these are 3 true statements that reflect the relationship between percents, fractions, and decimals. This implies we can write percents as decimals and fractions, and in fact we can. So let's just talk a little bit about the conversion process, and that's pretty much it for this topic. When writing percents as decimals or decimals as percents, it basically means we're just moving the decimal point. So it can be thought of in that simple of a way. If you want to talk a little bit more about the why, it's really because we're dividing or multiplying by 100, going back to what percent really means. Let's just try an example of each. So if I gave the example of 54% and I wanted to write this as a decimal, the decimal point in this number is currently understood to be at the end. So to write it as a decimal, I'm basically going to be dropping the percent symbol and moving the decimal 2 places to the left to arrive at 0.54. So 54% is the same as 0.54 as a decimal. Now to write decimals as percents, kind of the opposite direction now, let's say we were given a decimal, 0.83, and to write this as a percentage now, I'll take the decimal point, which is currently in between 0 and 8, and move it 2 places to the right, arriving at 83%. So we put that percent symbol on our final result. And that is how we write percents as decimals and decimals as percents. Finally, we also just want to make sure we can write percents as fractions and fractions as percents. So the stepping stone in between is basically the decimal. So if we were given 34% and asked to write it as a fraction lowest terms, I'm going to start by just saying 34% is the same as 0.34. That uses what we just discussed. Moving the decimal 2 places to the left to get it in decimal form. And in the first video we made on this topic, we learned that to write a decimal as a fraction, we just need to know about the place values. So if I read 0.34 out loud, I could read it really as 34 hundredths. So 34 hundredths would be a way to write it as a fraction, and then I'll just reduce. So these are both even. We'll knock this down to 17 over 50. So that would be the fraction form for 34%. And then finally, if we were going the other direction, if we were given a fraction and going back to a percent, I'm going to start by taking 5/8 and writing it as a decimal. If you recall in our first video, we had found this to be equivalent to 0.625, and how we got there was just dividing 5 by 8. Now that it's written as a decimal, we know we just need to move our decimal 2 places to the right, arriving at 62.5%. So basically we have a lot of decimal moving going on. in this conversion process, but hopefully that makes some sense in the converting between percents to fractions, fractions to percents, percents to decimals, decimals to percents, etc. So at this point, please try out the practice. Find the worksheet for this topic. It's titled Fractions, Decimals, Percents Practice, and then check your work with the key.